I saw the Broadway play Wicked this summer in New York City. Yes, it was my fourth time seeing it. Yes, I know every word. And yes, I was more excited than the small children sitting in the row behind me. Anyway, as the first half came to a close, and sorry for spoiling it for those of you who haven't seen it, with Alpha belting out the show-stopping number, Defying Gravity, while flying high above the audience, I started to cry. "Why are you crying?" my girlfriend asked me during intermission. And I said, "I just love perfection." My knee-jerk response caught me, and apparently all of you, by surprise. I mean, it was a perfect moment, to be clear, and I don't think I or anyone else would have loved it as much if, her voice cracked, or if the audio wasn't working, or if one of the flying monkeys fell from the rooftops. But I was wondering, do I really love perfection? And the more I thought about it, the more I had to admit that, yes, I kind of do. I love a perfect movie, a perfect meal, a perfect piece of writing. Anytime hard work and raw talent come together to create something beautifully perfect, it moves me, sometimes to tears. But I don't just love perfection when other people do it. I realize that I also want to be perfect. Now, I know I'm not perfect, but as a rabbi, I am constantly trying to hit those defying gravity-esque moments. I want to be the best rabbi. I know it's a little embarrassing for me to say out loud, and I know that I'm not supposed to be striving for perfectionism. I've heard lines like, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." But if I'm being honest, I thought that's just what you say to comfort people when they're doing something mediocre. If you really want to be the best, and here in high-achieving Washington, D.C., who doesn't want to be the best, then of course perfection has to be your goal. Now, I know there are negative consequences to perfectionism, but I thought that I had perfected perfectionism and avoided all of those negative consequences. And I had avoided those consequences, just not in the way that I thought. I was literally avoiding confronting them because I didn't want to admit to myself that maybe perfectionism wasn't working out so perfectly. I didn't want to face all the ways that it had negatively affected me. But even if I didn't want to see perfectionism's harmful effects, others close to me could. And so, like a good perfectionist, I decided to force myself to confront the costs of my perfectionism. And I'm now going to force all of you to confront those costs as well. Because I think we all have perfectionist tendencies to varying degrees. And I think if we're honest with ourselves about those costs, then we might decide that it's no longer worth it. Now, at first, when I started thinking about the costs of perfectionism, all I could think about were very perfectionist-y kind of costs. I'll tell you what I mean. For example, perfectionism can actually make you less perfect. Like when you overthink something, or when you over-edit something, or when you're overwhelmed by the standard of perfection so much that it makes you procrastinate until it's too late. Or another example of that, perfectionism can actually make you less productive by either wasting your energy on perfecting that thing when you could be spending that energy somewhere else, or waiting too long for the perfect moment, the perfect plan. But while I like the idea of judging perfectionism using perfectionist standards, I knew I wasn't really getting to the root problems. So I dug a little deeper, and I realized that part of why I was holding on to perfectionism was because I wanted to stave off complacency. Without perfectionism, I'd stop aiming so high and working so hard. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, as I hope I've already established, I really do not want to be mediocre. I want to be great. I want to accomplish things and feel proud of my accomplishments. But that's the paradox of perfectionism. It might push us to accomplish more, but it also prevents us from ever feeling that sense of accomplishment because it sets an impossible standard that will never be met. Yes, that impossible standard causes us to perpetually strive for more and for better, but it also means that we've doomed ourselves to a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. Now, it's good to value growth, to be ambitious, to have goals, and occasional dissatisfaction can be a powerful motivator. But if we are always dissatisfied, then we are always stuck in an unachievable future, and we are depriving ourselves of so many wonderful emotions that we could feel right now, here in the present. Emotions like pride, contentment, and joy. To allow ourselves to experience any of these feelings, we need to make our goals achievable, not perfect. But while these emotions sounded nice, I still didn't feel like sacrificing my perfectionism to feel them. I'd rather be great than content, or proud, or happy. Which begged the question, why was I holding on to perfectionism so tightly? And then it hit me. I think deep down, I want to be perfect in my work because I think that that is the source of my worthiness. I don't want to be proud of my accomplishments. I want to be loved because of them. This isn't conscious, of course. I'm not like going around being like, so what did you think of my sermon? Do you love me? But the reason that I work so hard at this job is because the better that I am at it, the more I'll feel wanted and needed. The problem with perfectionism was that I was linking my worth to my work. And this goes beyond work in the professional sense. If I'm not working to help or to please my friends, my family, my partner, then I'm convinced that I won't be loved by them. My perfectionism protects me from the hurt of not being loved for who I am by giving me something else to do just to get that love. But that attitude, I realized, was also preventing me from feeling loved as my imperfect self. By not allowing myself to be imperfect, I wasn't allowing myself to be loved as an imperfect person. Going even deeper, I realized that if I believed that I could only be loved if I was perfect, then that probably meant that I was also only loving others if they were being perfect. When we demand perfection from ourselves, we end up demanding it from others around us, especially those who are close to us. That was a hard pill to swallow. I like to think of myself as a nice, loving person. But perfectionism was focusing my attention on every little thing that wasn't perfect, causing me to be hypercritical, not just of myself, but of others too. This is the core problem with perfectionism. It makes me less loving towards myself and to others. It makes all of my relationships about meeting expectations, mine and theirs. I was missing out on so many experiences of intimacy, of vulnerability, of love, all because my perfectionism kept me focused on how well everyone was performing, myself included. So after confronting those hard truths, I decided to start exploring a goal other than perfectionism that might be a little healthier for me. Luckily, Judaism was very helpful here, because in Judaism, perfection is not the goal. I know that might seem like a counterintuitive message to hear on Yom Kippur, the day when we are meant to confront all the ways that we are not perfect. But that's actually the point. Judaism takes for granted that no one is perfect, far from it. Even our spiritual role models in the Torah. These characters are deeply flawed. They lie, they cheat, they get angry, they act in their own self-interest. As the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks writes, one of the most powerful features of the biblical narrative is that its portraits are not idealized. Its heroes are human. We fast on Yom Kippur not to pretend that we're like angels, but to remind us that we're humans. We have needs, we have desires. We're complicated, flawed, and broken. Angels are perfect, but perfection has its own limitations. Angels are two-dimensional and, let's be honest, pretty boring. That's why God gave the Torah to human beings. God doesn't want us to be perfect. As Rabbi Abram Joshua Heschel, a famous 20th century American rabbi, writes, perfection is divine. And to make it the goal of humans is to call on human beings to be divine. Said another way, we are not God, and we are not called upon to be God. We are called upon to be humans. On Yom Kippur, we are asked to own our imperfections. That's why traditionally we don't shower, we don't wear makeup, we don't wear deodorant or fragrances. It's the one day a year where we can't hide our natural human imperfections. The liturgy on Yom Kippur is centered around this public communal confession of all the mistakes that we've made this past year. Each of us has done at least some of them, and between all of us, we've done all of them. This ritual of public confession leaves us with the clear sense that missing the mark is normal. Judaism normalizes making mistakes so that we can learn from them and grow from them. Because to do that, we cannot feel any shame. Lo habaishan lamed, our rabbis teach us, an ashamed person cannot learn. So learning from our mistakes, normalizing our mistakes, that all happens through the process known as teshuvah, and that is the goal. To hit this point home, our ancient rabbis asked, who is more holy? Someone who has never messed up, the prototypical perfect person, or someone who has messed up, maybe even terribly, but has done teshuvah, owning the mistakes and learning from them. They say the person who has messed up and done teshuvah is holier than the person who never messes up in the first place. Perfectionism was never the goal. So for all the strivers out there, if we're not striving for perfectionism, then what might we strive for instead? I'll share 3 alternative goals. The first is not to strive for perfection, but to strive for satisfaction, for good enough. We read in the final verse of the first chapter of Genesis that after God created the entire world, God saw that it was very good. Not perfect, but very good. According to Rabbi Abahu, a rabbi from about 2,000 years ago, this proves that God created and destroyed many worlds before settling on this one, finally saying, this one pleases me, those others did not. This is an incredible take on the creation story. Why was God creating and destroying so many worlds? Was God trying to make the perfect world? Maybe there's no such thing as the perfect world. Maybe God had to learn that lesson first. So eventually God settled on this world, not because it was perfect, but because it was satisfactory. Imagine if we could do the same. Imagine if we could, instead of asking ourselves, is this perfect? Asking a much more freeing question. Am I content with this? Is this good enough? It's a mental shift that grounds us in our own experience, not the externally imposed expectations of others. It's a skill we perfectionists will need to learn to be content with what's enough. In a different rabbinic take on the creation story, God eventually had to say to the heavens and the earth, die, enough. This is why one of God's names is El Shaddai, translated according to the rabbis as the God who says, die, enough. The rabbis imagined God saying, had I not said this, the heavens and the earth would be continuously expanding. There's always more. There's always better. Those demands are never ending and exhausting. God understood that there has to be a limit. And the lesson for us is clear. At a certain point, we have to say that something is good enough. And by striving for enoughness in what we do, we might even come to accept the enoughness of who we are. Maybe we too can be good enough. My second suggestion to replace the goal of perfectionism is to do it with wholeheartedness. Make that the goal. There are a few references in the Torah that say we should be tamim, a Hebrew word that some rabbis over the years have translated to actually mean perfect or blameless. But others, like the famous French commentator Rashi, understand it to be synonymous with the word shalem, which means full or wholehearted. Understood this way, God's not asking us to be perfect or blameless. Rather, God is asking us to walk through this world with a full heart. As the Quaker theologian Parker Palmer writes in his book, A Hidden Wholeness, wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing brokenness as an integral part of life. He's right. You are not perfect. Others are not perfect. The world is not perfect. Brokenness is a part of everything. We can run from that brokenness, or like Parker Palmer suggests, we can embrace it. Wholeness makes space for brokenness. On Yom Kippur, today, we're taught that the Israelites received the second set of tablets at Mount Sinai, replacing the ones that Moses broke when seeing the Israelites worshiping a golden calf previously. But we're taught that the Israelites still carried those first shards of the broken tablets with the whole ones. The brokenness is part of the wholeness, and it's a part of us. Instead of striving to be perfect, to be like robots or angels, let's strive to be fully human, to feel everything with our full human heart. And finally, a third goal for ourselves that might replace perfectionism is to act with more mercy or compassion, known in Hebrew as rachamim. Many of us associate Yom Kippur with forgiveness, but Yom Kippur is equally associated, if not more so, with rachamim, with mercy. And mercy and forgiveness are not the same thing. We forgive someone who has done the work of teshuvah, who's repaired what was broken and has committed to not doing that mistake again. To be merciful is different. That's to choose to let go of someone's wrongdoings, mistakes, imperfections, even if they haven't done the work. To forgive is to allow someone to repair a mistake. To be merciful is to allow someone to be imperfect. I like to think of myself as a very forgiving person. Just take responsibility for exactly what you did, commit to never doing it again, and I will forgive you because I'm so forgiving. But I have found that that is actually quite a high bar to hold people up to, one that leaves me frequently disappointed in others. It has been much more freeing to try to accept others as they are, to accept that they may not change, and to love them anyway, to be a little less demanding of others around me and of myself. Of course, we can't expect mercy from others, certainly not someone we've harmed. Yom Kippur reminds us that we must do the work of teshuvah and ask for forgiveness, but we can strive to be merciful ourselves, to loosen our harsh judgment of what's right and wrong, and to accept others despite their failings. It may compromise our convictions, but it will strengthen our relationships. And so in this year ahead, I'm hoping to strive less for perfection and more for good enoughness, for wholeness, and for rachamim, for mercy. I'll end on a fittingly, probably imperfect note with a Hasidic story that I want to share that comes from Rav Simcha Bunim, who was a 19th century Hasidic rabbi living in Poland. This story was first related to me about 15 years ago by Rabbi Daniel Silverbush, and when I heard it, I thought it was a joke. But like many Hasidic stories, it stayed with me, and over time I've realized it's deeper than it initially seems. So here we go. One night, the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, was taking a carriage led by a few horses to a town a far distance away. A few hours into that journey, when the horses were used to stopping for food, the Baal Shem Tov pushed on. So the horses started to wonder to themselves, maybe we're not actually horses. Maybe we're humans. And that's why we haven't stopped to eat at the place we usually stop to eat for horses. It's because we're going to stop once we get to the place where humans stop to eat. So they kept going faster and faster, and eventually the Baal Shem Tov did stop to eat himself, but the horses didn't eat there either. And then they thought to themselves, maybe we're not even humans. Maybe we're angels. We don't need food at all. And so the Baal Shem Tov got back in the carriage, and they kept driving faster and faster, further and further, all through the night without any food. Eventually, the next morning, they arrived at their destination, and the Baal Shem Tov brought the horses to a horse stable where there was plenty of food and where they ate like horses. We can try to transcend who we are. We might even delude ourselves into thinking that we've done it, like the horses did, that we're perfect, like angels. But we're not, and eventually that truth, we'll have to face it just like the horses did when they ate like horses. I used to think trying to be perfect was the greatest challenge one could take on in life. I no longer think that. Rather than strive for perfection, I want to embrace this imperfect world with my full heart. I cannot think of a greater or more rewarding challenge than that. Shana Tova.